We are tuned in to fitness and consciousness. Today's episode is called The Art of Transformation. I got this idea I was watching a movie with a friend of mine called, what was it called? American Animals, I think is what it was called. And they're these college age kids, and they're stealing some old books from a library, and it's a true story. And then the librarian that was there when they were doing the robbery was talking about it was the real person in the film. They were like cutting to like the real people and then back to the movie, and she was talking about how they didn't use like helping people as a way to transform themselves for the transformation experience. And she was talking about how selfish they were, and she's still a librarian, at least as when the movie came out, at the same library. And I just thought that was interesting that she was talking about helping people as for the transformation experience. I was also watching the podcast with Mike Tyson and Joe Rogan. And Mike Tyson is somebody who has made quite a transformation by all apparent accounts. He went from being this teenage phenom, youngest heavyweight boxing champion ever still, and just a savage, brutal knockout artist. And in his life outside the ring, he wasn't such a great guy. He did a lot of bad things, and now he's like vegan, and I'm pretty sure he's still vegan, but he just talks about like love. And it's interesting how people love him so much, because here's this guy that did all this bad stuff, but people like glorify the fighter for many reasons, because we want to be able to do that ourselves. We wish we were that tough. But also, I think I don't know if part of it is like an American thing, but we like to see people make a comeback. We like to see people start off as not so good and then transform themselves into something great. And on the Joe Rogan podcast, Tyson was talking about he did DMT a few months ago, and that changed his way of thinking. And he's been a vegan for I don't know how many years now. And Joe asked him, well, what do you think you would have done if you tried DMT back when you were fighting? And Mike said, I might not have even wanted to have fought anymore. And a lot of people are getting these really amazing results from doing DMT, ayahuasca, and I've never done it myself. I've done other psychedelics, but I wouldn't say I really recommend anything except your own mind and your own discipline and your own will. But there's no doubting that people have gotten some amazing results, positive results from psychedelics. And DMT seems to be getting more and more popular, and people are becoming more and more open about the usage. But as I was thinking about this art of transformation, I was thinking, okay, well, should I call it the art and science of transformation? Because there is this science to it where we can start to learn a science like yoga. And I don't mean necessarily just the postures, the up, down, dog, modern postural yoga stuff, but just there's like the bhakti yoga, there's devotional yoga, and which is probably, well, I'm not going to dig into the different kinds exactly, but more just almost any way will work when you get into the science of it. When you get into the psychedelics and stuff that's illegal, maybe the most dangerous part about it is getting caught with it. So if you're not in a place where it's legal, is it really worth it? And Mike Tyson's building this ranch. It's called Tyson Ranch, and he's going to be growing marijuana out there, and it's going to be this nice resort. And he's going to be shipping weed out to people, but he talks about how much that calms him down. And he's a guy that has struggled a lot with himself, not liking himself, not liking what he has done. And he went from being this bad guy that does bad things to, I don't know, who knows what he's really doing now. But it seems like he's a different guy. It seems like he's actually transformed. And we all transform. I think day by day, we become more and more of whatever it is that we're doing. So if you want to be a guitar player, you go buy a guitar. In 5 minutes, you're a guitar player. You can't hardly pluck a note that sounds good, but you practice every day for a few weeks. Oh, you can make a couple chords sound good, and then after a few months, you can put together that 2-chord song, and you can go on and on. And then after a year, maybe you can be quite a player in a year, and people will think it's quite nice to listen to, and you can give them transformative experiences through your playing. I would say it usually takes a lot longer than a year to get really good at the guitar, but you get what I'm saying. When I had my own transformative experience, I've talked about this on the show a few times, but about 6.5 years ago, I was like drinking, smoking weed, nothing too extreme, no other drugs or anything. And I wasn't doing like crazy amounts, but it was almost daily. And I wouldn't say that I had like a major problem, but it wasn't doing me any favors either. And I was driving a cab at the time, and I picked this woman up, and the first time I picked her up, she sat in the back seat, but I never forgot her. She left an imprint on me, you could say. And then a week or two later, she called my phone directly instead of calling into the dispatch. And so I go and I pick her up for work, and she sits in the front seat. We pretty much right away start talking about spiritual things, and I've been studying this stuff since I was a little kid. And her earth story, as I call it, which I'll explain more later, is she was from India, and she moved to Indianapolis, and she was in an arranged marriage. And she seemed to know everything about spirituality, but not in a know-it-all kind of a way. It was just this easygoing, light sort of way. She just seemed to know everything. We would talk about these these subjects just pretty much as soon as she would get in the car. I was picking her up. Then after that time she called me directly, I was picking her up regularly. I would take her to and from work almost every day, 5 days a week. And this went on for, I don't remember exactly, but maybe a couple months, maybe 3 months, maybe more, maybe a little bit more. I don't know. And I knew that she didn't drink or smoke. And I was reading at the time, I kept reading about all these, like there was this Qigong book I was reading, and this guy, he was already a master of Qigong. He said his teacher told him that if he wants to get to the higher level, he has to quit drinking, period. And so he had a decision to make. You can stay this level of a master. You're already a master. But if you want to get to the next level, you have to quit drinking. And so he did. And at the time, I'm reading about all kinds of stuff, and I have been for years and years and years, 20 years since I was a little kid. But I was reading about these yogis, like I think it's like the Shaivites. They'll smoke weed. It's part of their spirituality. They'll smoke marijuana and hash, and I'm not sure what all they do. It's just kind of like part of their trip, and it's part of their practice. But I always thought there was just something in me that I think that maybe always was trying to tell me to let that go. And I think maybe it can be useful, but then we have to know when to let it go. Once the boat gets to the shore, you don't need it anymore. It's time to keep walking. And so I was picking her up often twice a day. And a little hint into like what this was like. Her husband could have taken her to work, but she would have gotten there like 10 minutes earlier. And she didn't want to wait that 10 minutes at work. And that was her justification for calling me. 10 minutes. And this was about maybe like a $12 ride, $13 ride. So, I mean, and I'd drop her off at her apartment. We'd wait that. So if we got there to her work, sometimes we'd talk in the car a little bit before she got out. I'd be dropping her off at her apartment, and we'd be talking for a little while before she come out, maybe 20 minutes sometimes before she would go in. And there was this time where it was super hot out. I mean, it had to have been like close to 100 degrees. And she wanted all the windows up, fan off, no air conditioner, no fan, no nothing, all the windows up. And I'm just pouring sweat. My shirt's soaked. I'm just dripping sweat. I didn't care. She wants the windows up. The windows are up. And we get to her apartment, and the car is just getting hotter and hotter. And I'm just sweating profusely. But there was no way I was going to roll a window down or something crazy like that, or turn the air conditioner on. And I'm looking at her, and she didn't have a single drop of sweat. And we were talking, I think that time for like maybe 20 minutes, and she gets out of the car, and she's walking it back up to her apartment. And it's kind of hard to explain, but the way I try to explain is she was able to show me my potential. And not that it was necessarily her, but maybe someone like her. I'd been single for a long time and not interested in the girls that were interested in me. And it was kind of this, my buddies didn't understand why I'm not dating these girls that were good to go, as one of them would say. But she's walking up to her apartment, and I could just see, and I knew that I had to quit drinking and smoking. And the message that I got was, you have to become a magnet for what you want to attract. That was what I got. So I went home and I had my last half a joint and my last beer. I didn't even finish it. And then I woke up in the morning, and I knocked that like a little bit of a beer out. I knocked the bottle over when I got out of the bed, and the smell of it was like 50 million rotten beers. It was so exaggerated. It was really weird because it really wasn't very much that spilled. Maybe there was like a half or a quarter of the beer left, and like it just spilled, and I saw it, and I picked it right back up. So it really wasn't that much, but the smell, it was so overpowering. And it hasn't smelled good since. It hasn't sounded good since. Every once in a while it might, like, not so much anymore even, but sometimes it would kind of sound good, like a beer kind of sounded good, or but that was it. So I had my last little bit that day, and I never heard from her again. There was no text, no phone call, no ride, never saw her at a store, nothing. I've tried to look her up on Facebook, and nothing. There was no trace. And it wasn't long after, I guess, that I erased her name from my phone. I'm not sure why I did that. But she was in this arranged marriage, so it wasn't like I was trying to really make anything happen that way. But I guess kind of in my mind, if all these other dominoes fell, then who knows? But I wasn't going to try to, It was kind of like if you ever seen the show Touched by an Angel. The angels are only in that town talking to that man or the woman or the kid or whatever for just as long as they need. So maybe they're there for a week, a month, whatever it is. And as soon as that dial is turned and that person makes that change, well, then the angel's off to the next one. They don't need to stay anymore. And that's how this was. So when I say that she was from India and in an arranged marriage, I feel like I'm almost like lying about that. But if I say that I think she was an angel, I feel like I'm telling the truth about that. It feels weird to say she was from India and in an arranged marriage. Like, what? But an angel? Yeah. That's what she was. Something like that. Bodhisattva, I have no idea. But it was something like that. But to think of her as just like a human doesn't really make very much sense, especially looking back. And that little change that she made, it's still there. So when I think about these transformations, I'm thinking of how we do things little by little. So not everything is just this one day you do this and then the next day you don't. It can be like that, but a lot of it is more gradual. And, like if you're trying to be a good guitar player, nobody starts off as an awesome guitar player. It takes a lot of practice. But there's something about that Mike Tyson story that resonates with people, and I've done some martial arts competition, a couple like the MMA fights. And I think of, when I was trying to do that, we get these like signs. I think I might do a show coming up on signs, or maybe I'll do it right now. But we get these signs, and I don't know if we take them for what they may or may not be. We just make up what they are, right? But I've been doing martial arts for a long time, and since I was I started jiu-jitsu when I was 18, Japanese style. And then I'm not sure how long ago it was, maybe close to 10 years or so. Not sure exactly. Maybe longer than that. I thought I would try a couple MMA fights. And so I started going to this school, and it was the school that put on these fights. They'd set up a cage, not at the school, but at different places. So I signed up to fight, and then so the people that I was training with, they didn't seem to be very high level, and so I thought that this is the level that I'm going to be getting in the their art was not as sophisticated. Maybe they hadn't been doing it as long or whatever, but especially the ground fighting stuff, and I wasn't having trouble with the people at the school. I still knew plenty of other people that could beat me. I never thought I was the best, but I wanted to test myself out. And so I signed up for my first fight, and just everything in training started going wrong. And I was going to the school, but I was also depending on buddies to come over to my garage and work with me on the way that I wanted to do things. And so like leading up to it, I ended up getting vertigo. I used to get vertigo. And so if I just kind of like looked up, I would start getting really dizzy. And there were a couple times that were so bad. If you're ever on that ride at the fair, sometimes it's called Gravitron or something like that, where it spins around real fast and pins you to the sides of it. And it was like I would feel like that. Like I'd lay in the bed and it would feel like I was just spinning around so hard, like couldn't even like sit up. And so I had some vertigo going into this fight. And so I show up there going through it anyway. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm just going to try not to go to the ground. Because if I go to the ground, which is my specialty, then, a 3-year-old would be able to beat me. Because if I go to the ground, I'm going to be so dizzy, I'm not going to be able to do anything. And so I'm just going to try to keep it standing. And like, okay, whatever. And so I weigh in. I'm like one of the only guys that doesn't cut weight. I was fighting at 170, and I weighed in at like 164, and I had my jeans on, keys in my pocket, all that kind of stuff. Everybody else is like stripping down, trying to defecate extra half pound to make weight and all kinds of like crazy stuff. Not to get too graphic, but that's what was happening. Like, what kind of a weakness is it that you would go to such extremes to go cut weight? Are you a fighter or are you not? You afraid to fight somebody your own size? It's ridiculous. So I'm sitting and I'm talking to this guy, kind of like buddy up with this guy, and it turns out that the guy I was supposed to fight didn't show up. And then the guy that he was supposed to fight didn't show up either. And so the guy running the thing asked, do you guys just want to fight each other? And yeah, sure. And before that, he was telling me about his wrestling, and his son had just got his 100th wrestling win, and he was this pretty fantastic wrestler. And he was a bit shorter than me, just like real stocky powerhouse of a guy. And but I wasn't worried about it. And so it was like, and I almost said something before about having vertigo, because it's like if I hit the ground, it's not going to be good. But I didn't say anything. So we go in to fight, get in the cage door locks, and I'm ready to go. And so he kind of goes in. I'm throwing a couple like jabs, and I'm thinking, okay, he's a wrestler, so he's gonna go in to take me down. And when he does that, I'm gonna catch him with an elbow. I'm gonna elbow him in the head when he goes for his takedown. And so I'm trying to like time that, and I'm throwing out some like easy punches. He goes in for a couple takedowns and doesn't get very close to me, and I'm trying to time my elbow. And then all of a sudden he just kind of like charges at me, and I go, charges my, hits my back up against the cage. And there's this technique where you can push somebody up against the cage, and then when they kind of bounce off of it, you do a double leg takedown. So that's what I thought he was going to do. And so he goes to do that, but instead of doing the double leg takedown, he uses the recoil to do this like overhand right, and he hits me right on the button, right on the chin. And it didn't knock me out, but I went like, I don't think maybe one knee hit the ground in one hand, and then I popped right back up, but the referee stopped it. And it was very, very frustrating. It was very, very frustrating. I'm not saying it was necessarily a bad stoppage, but it's kind of iffy, I think. But I wouldn't say it was really a bad stoppage. But I was very, very frustrated, because if I didn't have the vertigo, it probably wouldn't have dropped me at all. Maybe it would have. It was a good shot right on the button, but I didn't go I wasn't actually knocked out. It was just like a flash where your like legs drop, legs go, and then pop right back up. And it's very frustrating. And it happened in less than a minute. And I thought he was somebody that I should be able to beat. So I signed up for another one. And when I'm learning about the guy that I'm supposed to fight, I just heard that he was a good wrestler. And he used to go to the school that holds the fights. And so I wasn't too worried about it, because if he takes me down, I'm going to have my jiu-jitsu skills, and I should be cool. But I ended up getting this knee injury right before that fight. And I had like the buddy of mine that I was training with a lot, like he came over to train. I think there was a couple other people there too. And before we even took our shoes off to start training, for some reason, he just kicked me in the kneecap, and down I went. I mean, I was on the ground like, oh my God. And my knee was just jacked. My knee was just jacked up. So I couldn't train. I couldn't do anything. I mean, it was very, very frustrating. And then so I go into that fight. However long later it was, I don't remember exactly. I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm not worried about it. I'm going to go. And then I was like, I just don't want to make a silly mistake and like drop my guard or something. I just don't want something stupid to happen like in the first one where I just get this trick where this guy this looks like he's going to do this very common move and then does something else. And it happened relatively quickly. So I get into the fight, get in the cage, and he was very aggressive, but very like loose. So he wasn't really landing very much. I was blocking pretty much all of his punches, and then once we went to the ground, he felt really loose. So I'm thinking it's just a matter of time before I catch him in something, because he's not really holding me down with any kind of pressure. He's trying to throw a bunch of punches, and they're not really connecting. But I'm spending all the time like blocking punches because he was going for it. And then I was just getting really frustrated. At the end of the second round, my arms were like smoked. They were so heavy. And I wasn't getting any advice from my corner. I wasn't getting any I was very frustrated with my corner. I was very frustrated with my training leading up to it. I was very frustrated by not taking these fights as seriously as I should have. And so I didn't go out for the third round. I was thinking I'm supposed to have I'm picking my kids up the next day. And right now I'm fine, except for extremely frustrated and like tired, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. And so I was like, even though I felt like I should have been able to beat this guy because his game was so loose. If that, like one of those shots gets through before I get a hold of an arm or get a hold of his neck, it could mean the difference between I'm going home or I'm going to the hospital. And there's a lot of people going to the hospital. There's a stretcher. When you're watching on TV, or I guess different ones probably do it differently, but there's a stretcher and the medics not too far from the cage. And it's serious business. And there were people that got really messed up. I mean, you're fighting people that practice fighting all the time. It doesn't get a whole lot more serious than that. You know, like soldiers and stuff, of course. But so I didn't go out for the third round, and I was very, very frustrated. Mostly with myself. It wasn't my corner's fault. I was the one that was in there doing, well, not much of anything, trying not to lose more than I was trying to win, and then end up giving that fight up against somebody who I was pretty sure I could beat. I should have been able to beat. And when, like we were talking about afterwards, talking to the guy that I fought, and he was talking about how scared he was before the fight. And I wasn't worried at all. And I wasn't worried before my first one either. I've had a lot of pretty hard sparring against guys that were a lot bigger. I'm like 5'10", 5'11", 165, 160, 165. And I've trained with a lot of people who I know when we're sparring, it's probably not going to work out real well for me. So what? I'm going for it. But so I wasn't worried. And my buddy of mine, well, don't worry about that. So after that, was like, I have to make a decision. And it's like, am I going to sign up for another one? And I helped other people train for fights, and they did well. Um, they won. I thought, okay, I'm going to just forget about it. And it was tempting kind of to get back in there. But then later on, when I looked back at it, and this is, like I said, going on 10 years or so now, I was pretty glad that I lost, because if I would have kept going, and then you fight guys that are better and better and better and better and better organizations, then your chances of getting really hurt start increasing dramatically. Guys that get to like the UFC level, and man, they really go through a lot, and a lot of their injuries are not made public. So a lot of the head injuries, a lot of the concussions, a lot of this stuff isn't advertised. It's not. It's kept under wraps. Partly the fighters don't want to let on because they don't want to lose the chance of they don't want to lose their chance. So they'll fight. Pretty much if you're watching a UFC, they're all injured. They all have some kind of injury. You just can't do that kind of training and not have some kind of injury. But it's those head injuries that are the scariest. So looking back, I was kind of like glad I lost, because, man, what if I won? Then I would have kept doing it. So I had to transform my ideas. Like I said, I never thought I was the best. I knew other guys that could beat me, and it wasn't. Powerful sneeze. Yeah. So, but I kept training and everything. As a side note here, I got a new microphone. I hope people can tell. There's been a couple of audio issues that, testing the audio out before, it sounds like it's going to be fine. And then when I'm listening back to a show, especially ones where there's more than one person with me, there's been some issues, and mostly it's been fine. But this show is growing, and I want it to be more and more professional sound. I don't want those glitches or any kind of audio problems or video problems. And so I got a new microphone today. It's the same brand as the one I was using before, Blue, but it's just the next. It's called the Yeti, Blue Yeti. I don't get any kind of endorsement money from them, but if you're listening, I'll take it, because this is a great microphone. I'm really happy with this one. And if the sound isn't really great right now, there is an adjustment on the gain. When I did my testing, it sounded good, but I'll be able to adjust as I go also, and it'll sound better when I have more people with me also. Anyways, so normally a lot of times lately I've been going through a lot of different books, these old poetry books, Rumi, Tagore, Hafiz. I got a bunch of books from the library, some new ones of people that I hadn't heard, and reading like Grateful Dead lyrics. And I went through about 20 books this time, and nothing really nothing really resonated with me. I was kind of like trying to pick stuff out. I was like, this doesn't quite fit, but I'm going to read it anyway. But I decided not to just try to make something fit when it doesn't. So this time I'm not reading anything. When we find these transformative experiences, we usually want to tell people how great they are. And maybe that's through yoga, when there's a science to the yoga. There's also like there's different levels of this yoga game, right? So people will enter into it from their own entrance. They get their own door. So maybe they're like, they want to be more physically free in their body. Maybe they're really tight. They don't move so well. So then they go to a yoga class because they just want to physically be better. And that's okay. And then there's people that are more into the meditative. They don't really care so much about the physical stuff. And that's okay too. And then there's the bhakti, there's the devotional. But when we learn about these things, if they work for us, we usually want to pass them on and tell people how great these things work. And so whether that's like the maybe being an artist, like painting, or whatever it is that we're choosing to do, we want to pass it on. And something that I've talked about on the show before, and I had my friends over, a couple of friends over last whenever it was, Joy Lavelle and JP Rowley, they were on the show. They'll be coming on more regularly. But we have this group, and if you're in the Indianapolis area, go find the Facebook group, Indie Strength and Movement Community, and join that group. And we get together at different places, play around in the woods, go to these different parks and do stuff. And it's really cool to have people that are just that are on the same page. It's so cool just to see how everybody's different strengths. And it's neat because everybody kind of like becomes like, oh, here's your new best friend. It's really neat how it works. So join us there. And if you're not in the Indianapolis area, then maybe start your own group or find your own group of people that are like doing what you do. So I see, so many people are just like by themselves and they're alone, and people are always like messing with their phones. And when this group gets together, the Indie Strength and Movement community, I mean, we get on our phones to like take pictures or take a video of somebody doing whatever it is that they're doing. But I doubt anybody's checking their Instagram. I doubt anybody is on, scrolling around Facebook. We're in the moment. And so if you can find something like that, it's really rewarding. And that's the transformative experience in itself. Because we're all going through these transformations. Sometimes it's not quite so perceptible, but like little by little, we're becoming more and more of what we do. So I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up here. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I hope the audio is that much better, and we will see you next time.